Creeped by a young girl. This happened about 5 years ago when I was 16 years old and was attending my last summer at my sleepaway camp in West Virginia. Granted, I was only there for a month, but it was the longest month of my life. My cabin was full of girls I knew from previous summers and a girl no one knew, Mary. She was kind of the oddball out, and it was obvious after a few days that she isolated herself and had a hard time fitting in, so I tried my best to include her in our normal activities, while the rest of my friends didn't pay her much attention. After about a week, she started clinging to me, which I figured was because she just liked me as a new friend, and I was the only one that showed her any attention at all. Wherever I went, she was kind of just right there, always a step behind me, right in my periphery. We were required to take buddies to the bathroom, and whenever I casually mentioned I was going, she would jump up and volunteer to take me, nothing weird. I started noticing strange habits of hers. Whenever we walked to an activity, she would walk next to me, and if she noticed our walking was out of sync, like my right leg went forward when her left leg did, she would skip to adjust it, so we were walking the same way. Now this sounds a little questionable. I thought maybe I was overthinking it, until several of my friends mentioned they were noticing this stuff happening as well, without me saying anything. During meals, we were assigned tables, but even though she sat across the entire dining hall away from me, she never stopped watching. I would go up to the buffet and fill my plate, noticing that as I sat down, she would go up and choose the exact same foods as me while still watching me. This happened with every activity from arts to sports, etc. At this point, I wasn't creeped yet. I was just a little weirded out by her tendencies. On a Tuesday, this is relevant. I was just starting to ride the horse I was newly assigned during a ring lesson. The horse was a little wild from the winter off and bucked me off, causing me to be forced to stay in the infirmary during the lesson times for the rest of the week. The following week, I watched as Mary went out of her way to request the same horse that I had fallen off of. I was kind of perplexed by this, of course. The next Tuesday of that week, I watched as she threw herself off that horse and was forced to stay in the infirmary alone with me. My 1 hour a day that I could escape her was now also taken away. I started to get really annoyed by her because no matter what I was doing, she was always there. We had to switch bunks midway through the session, and I was genuinely angry when she requested not only the same cabin as me, but also the bed next to mine. We both chose top bunks that were aligned on the same wall, so my feet were at her head. I started to notice even weirder things. I was writing a letter home one day and felt like I was being watched. I looked to my right and saw Mary was sitting facing forward, but her head is crooked to the side staring at me with a demonic smile. My stomach dropped. A couple nights after that encounter, I woke up with the same feeling of being watched. It was pitch black, but I grabbed a flashlight to go walk to the bathroom since I was already up. But nope, I turned over with my light to see Mary standing next to my bed, with her head at my level watching me sleep, just standing in the middle of the cabin, staring. I was speechless. I just figured maybe she needed someone to take her to the bathroom. I start to leave for the bathroom and she follows. I was thoroughly creeped. Stuff like that kept happening for the rest of the session, but when her parents finally came to get her, I refused to even look up to say bye. I'd never been so happy to leave a place in my life. I can't express the level of creepiness over the computer, but I can say, I literally felt like I was in danger when I was near her. I never want to figure out why she was seemingly so obsessed with me. One of my residents is obsessed with me. June 14, 2018. This has been going on for about a month now, but only really escalated to the creepy territory tonight. I was almost hesitant to post this here because I truly care about the villain of the story, but it's recently became too much for me to hold in and keep to myself. I'm a dietary aide at a local assisted living facility. If you're not familiar with those, they're sort of the step before nursing homes. Our residences are healthy enough to live relatively independently, and we only assist them in their daily routine. The one that I work at really feels like the opposite of a nursing home. Rather than being cold and clinical, it's warm and almost feels like a lavish hotel. My job as a dietary aide is to assist in preparing food, serving food to the residences, cleaning the kitchen and dining room, etc. Think of it as being like a waiter for the same group of people every single day. To give you a little background, I'm a 17-year-old girl who just graduated high school and is pursuing an associate's degree in pre-med at a local college before moving away to university. I've been working at this facility for around a year now, and have grown to really know pretty much all of my residents. One of my residents is Mary, who is mostly deaf, who lives there with her 3 sisters. When I first started working there, Mary and I really didn't talk much or anything beyond me buying her drinks and taking her order or stuff like that. I could hardly understand anything she said anyways. However, I knew she was lonely due to the communication barrier between her and the others, so I attempted to reach out to her a little bit. I would smile and wave at her, ask her how her day was, etc. It wasn't anything I didn't do for other residences, but it excited her immensely. Mary is a very touchy woman, and by that, I mean she likes to touch those she's talking to, pat them, hug them, etc. I'm autistic, and I usually jump when touched, but for some reason, she never made me uncomfortable. I took this as a good sign, and I allowed her to touch me, since I knew it was her way of showing affection, since talking wasn't very easy for her. It started as pats on the shoulder and back, then it was hugs, then full-on embraces, and now she's at the point where she feels the need to kiss me over and over. This was the point when I became a bit uncomfortable with the contact, but only because I was afraid of how it might be perceived. I have short hair and an overall butchy and masculine appearance that makes many residences with memory issues believe that I'm a man, and I'm also an open lesbian. One of my coworkers had to be physically separated from a resident who was romantically pursuing her, and I was afraid that my interactions with Mary would be seen as romantic or sexual. Just to clear things up, I am not attracted to Mary, and I'm almost certain that she's not attracted to me. She constantly assures me that she loves me and that I'm really sweet, but she never comes off as flirty or anything like that. After a few weeks of this, Mary has become persistent. When she's done eating, she stands by the kitchen door as I do dishes and simply watches me, waiting for me to come out and talk to her. In really busy times, she's waited almost an hour for me to be free, just standing in the doorway and looking in. As I'm serving food and taking order, she watches me. Co-workers and residences usually find it sweet or funny how she reacts, but she literally won't let me go once she has a hold of me. She's actually a really tiny woman, but she's strangely strong, and even if she wasn't, I can't exactly push one of my residences away, so I'm pretty much forced to deal with the hugs, kisses, and assurance of her love until either I or a coworker can get it through to her that I have to go back to work. Even then, it doesn't always work out since she's half deaf. She usually understands what I'm saying after a while, but whenever a coworker comes to my rescue, Mary becomes strangely hostile towards them, holding me tighter and saying she'd hold me for the rest of her life, if she could. Tonight went as usual, with Mary waiting for me, and attacking as soon as I stepped out of the kitchen. One of the CNAs told her that I had to get back to work, and Mary gave her literally the dirtiest, meanest look I'd ever seen her give, and whispered to me that she would be back later. As a coworker and I were closing the kitchen, Mary showed up again, just like she had promised. My coworker was getting the mop water ready in the back of the kitchen, and I stepped out to clean the counter in the dining room when she latched onto me. "No one can bother us now," she said, and I heard it pretty clear. She didn't like it, she continued, most likely talking about the CNA that interrupted her. Mary embraced me, kissing me over and over, and told me how much she loved me, and how she would love me for the rest of her life. After about 5 minutes of this, I was determined to just get back to work, but she hugged me tighter. Eventually, someone was trying to get a luggage cart through the dining room, so I tried to break it off to let them through, but Mary just dragged me to the other side to let them through without letting me go. It was nearly 10 more minutes until I could convince her to let me go. According to the CNAs, all Mary talks about is me, even when I'm off, and Mary knows I'm off. She waits for me, as though I might somehow show up. I truly do love and care about Mary, and I often wonder what made her latch onto me. I don't know if I remind her of someone from the past, or if she just happens to really like me. But it's getting to the point where her life revolves around me, and she's willing to fight against anyone who gets in the way of that. It would be really sweet and cute if she just happened to like me, but she can't stand to be away from me. What really scares me is how she retaliates against everyone in order to be with me. My mom's theory is that Mary knows her life is coming to an end, she's at least 85 to 90, and finds some sort of comfort in me. June 16, 2018. Update. You know my theory about how Mary might think I'm a man? Yeah, it turns out that was the case. One of the admins at work told me to avoid Mary until they could talk to her about the situation. As I did dishes tonight, we had the kitchen doors closed so that Mary couldn't get to me. She started banging on the door, staring in at me. When a CNA told her that she needed to leave and let me just do my work, Mary then said, "I want him," and the CNAs tried to explain to her that I was not only a girl, but also a minor, and they just sent Mary into a frenzy, as she claimed that they were lying, and that she wanted to be with her man. She started making threats, both legal and physical, and eventually, it was decided that corporate would be brought into it, and decided the best option would be kicking her out, since she technically sexually harassed a minor. I was told this by one of my coworkers who was helping to guard the door, and I was stunned, horrified, and a lot of other things I can't really describe. This whole time, all the kissing, touching, holding, it was all sexual. All the time she had invited me to her room, it wasn't just to hang out with me, it was to have sex with me. This woman, in which I thought of sort of a grammar-esque figure, was sexually and romantically obsessed with me, and I can't help but feel violated. Even though she wasn't allowed to come near me, she sat by the dining room sobbing, feeling as though her only love was taken from her. It's sort of a difficult situation, since I truly do love her, but not in the way that she loves me. I know now that she's not all there in the head, and I wish that I would have known this before reluctantly allowing her to kiss me on the mouth and touch me on the chest, thigh, etc. I thought it was just her strange way of expressing herself through touch, but it seems that I was simply too optimistic. Mary, as much as I care about you and want you to be happy, let's not meet. Little girl that likes dead people. I was working 12-hour overnights in a nursing home. I was on the general unit that night, and a resident was close to death. I got a report when I arrived at 6 p.m. from the day nurse who told me that Mary's circling the drain. She'll go for you tonight. She told me that Mary suddenly had family showing up now that she was dying. Unfortunately, this is very common. Residents have lived with us for years, and we never see a single family member until they were dying. Our residents were all private-paying folks that could afford $8,000 to $10,000 a month for high-end nursing home care. The rooms looked like Hilton suites. When someone was close to death, family members would crawl out of the woodwork to prove how much they loved Grandma, and of course, all of her jewelry. Mary lived with us 4 years, and I honestly didn't even know she had family. Her attorney visited regularly, but he was paid to oversee her care. I went to meet the family. There was a son and a grandson sitting in the room, and a little great-granddaughter that was about 7 to 8 years old, sitting on the floor outside the room in the hallway. The adults sat in Mary's room, sleeping or praying on laptops, and let the little girl run all over the unit without any supervision. It was a long night. The little girl was not afraid of the elderly residences at all. I first caught her standing in another residence's room, stroking the face of an elderly woman. I thought she was sweet, that she was visiting other residences, but I stepped into the room and asked her to leave. I told her to please go back to her great-grandma's room and not go into other residences' room. She smiled prettily and said, "I like the way her skin feels," as she left the room. Okay, so the kid is a little creepy. She goes back to Mary's room and I go about my duties. I don't see the kid for a while and it's super late, so I assume they took her home. About 1 a.m., I come out of the medication room and I see this kid standing in the hallway all by herself. She's staring into another resident's room but not going in. I walk down the hall to send her back to her great-grandma's room again. This time I am really annoyed that her family is letting her run around at 1 a.m. at her age, all by herself, in a nursing home. As I walk up to her, before I can say anything, she smiles at me and asks, "Do you like to touch them?" Completely forgetting what I wanted to say, I just stare at her and say, "What?" She looks into the resident's room she was standing outside of and says, "The old people, do you like touching them? When they're dead, I mean." I don't even know what to say to this. It's dark, and this kid is creepy. She's way too articulate for how old she looks. When I don't reply, she says, "Does their skin feel any different when they're dead?" Not knowing what to say to smiling kid who asks if I like touching dead bodies, I just tell her to go back to her great-grandma's room. She glares at me and looks angrier than I thought a kid could look, but she walks back to her great-grandma's room. Mary died about 4 a.m. I did not see the little kid again, but I was afraid I would see her in there rubbing Mary's skin. The son and grandson left before the funeral home arrived to take the body, but I didn't see the little girl leave with them. I assumed that they took her home after we had our enlightening chat about how dead people feel. It gave me the creeps I never saw her again. I look over my shoulder the rest of the night for that damn kid. The next morning, I told a day shift nurse about how creepy the little kid was. She told me, "I'm glad she wasn't here on my shift. I just had the son and grandson." She swore that the little girl was not there on her shift. I guess she must have arrived after my shift started. It was as I drove home that I realized I had not seen anyone interact with a kid all night, except for me. I never saw anyone talk to her, and I never actually walked into Mary's room. I also did not confront her family about the kid's actions because I did not want to seem rude, complaining about their kid when their loved one was dying. Their family had never mentioned the kid at any time I was in the room, doing cares on Mary. Even the resident she was touching at the start of my shift never woke up as she stroked her cheek. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. Every night I work from then on, I always keep an eye out for creepy little girls. Kids in hospital and medical facilities still creep me out. To this day. Scary Mary. This is my first time posting anything here, but I feel like I have an interesting story to share. I've always wanted to turn it into a book or something, but I've been super busy with school. To start out, this story sort of takes place on and off again throughout most of my life. It started out as a typical "my parents got a divorce when I was young" situation, but it unfolded into so much more. In fact, I'm still picking up pieces of everything that happened. Just a warning, this is a super long story. I don't blame you if you lose interest halfway in. There's a lot of backstory that I feel is important to understand what happened. As it stands now, my father is dead. It was ruled a suicide, but I think that was only half of what happened. I'll talk about everything that led up to this, but more importantly, I believe that Mary definitely had a hand in what happened. My mother and father divorced when I was around 4 years old. Almost everyone I know had gone through some sort of similar situation. I have 2 brothers, one older and one younger. We saw him about every other weekend. He paid child support. You get the gist. One weekend visit, my father introduces us to a woman he's seeing named Mary. Her eyes and hair are dark, and her skin is pale. She has an obsession with the color red. Something was immediately off to me, but I didn't really start to know what she was capable of until later. I didn't know it at the time, but Mary was one of the main reasons my parents got divorced. My father cheated with my mother with her. He met her while he was working as a waiter at a Red Lobster. When he moved over to his career at a casino as a slot machine repairman, she followed. Mary would follow my dad anywhere. They got married pretty quickly after my mother and father divorced. I never even knew there was a wedding until later. My mother hated her, but she never badmouthed my father or Mary in front of my brothers and I. She felt that it was important for us to make judgments for ourselves, even if this woman was part of the reason in which her marriage was broken up. We continued to visit what was now Dad and Mary's house on our scheduled time with Dad. I always associated their house with red. Their house was always decorated with strawberries. Mary liked red sheets. She had red sweaters and red pants. It was weird. Mary was just unnecessary drama for a while. Things like buying us toys that we could only keep at Dad and Mary's house, or saying that she and my father wanted up custody for us instead of my mom. I feel like these things were harmless in a way. Every divorcing couple probably has some sort of variation of this type. Things carried on like this for a couple of years. We would have a special variation of Christmas or Easter or whatever aside from what we celebrated with my mom. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, when I remember the first incident that confirmed that I knew this wasn't right. My little brother was a super curious child and he was about 4 years old. He had scooted the dining table chair to the fridge in order to get a cereal box on top, and when he reached up, he pulled down a handgun instead of the cereal box. I panicked and got my dad, who acted really funny about it. My memory is fuzzy, but I remember going home early that weekend. My dad didn't know the gun was there because it was Mary's. It was at this point that my mom started to have trouble with us going over there. My father got worse about being able to come pick us up. He was unreliable for the most part to begin with, but I knew that he was 10 times worse when he was around Mary. My mom told me later when I was much older that Mary called her house around the time of the gun incident and said, "I want your life." My mother is a really tough lady. She grew up in East LA in California. This scared her. She was going to get a restraining order soon. I guess what Mary meant was that she wanted my mom's stability. Even as a single mother with 3 kids, she was doing very well for herself and even dating. But even so, how long had she obsessed with my mom before she and my father ever got divorced? What did that even mean? Not long after the phone call, my mom heard her car being smashed into one night. Someone had taken a brick and smashed the driver window. Nothing was taken. I know it was Mary. We had no way to prove it, but I just know. My dad and Mary had a baby. Her name is Madison. I only remember holding and playing with her for so long. I can't imagine all the shit she's been through. My mom met and married my stepdad pretty soon after that, and they decided it would be best to move to Florida. We had other family there, and there weren't many jobs where we were living in Tennessee. I don't remember any problems at all when we were so far from my dad and Mary. We stayed for about a year, and then we moved back to Tennessee. My stepdad was able to get a better job again, and we were closer to my mom's parents. This is when the phone calls start. As soon as we moved back, we would get phone calls where someone would just listen for a few minutes and then hang up. The numbers were always blocked, but I'm sure it was her. She always knew where he lived because we started seeing my dad again. The calls continued for years. It became like an inside joke. We all knew who it was, but there wasn't anything we could do about it. My father denied it. At any time I asked him about it, he took her side. We fell into this thing where my mom was the bad guy, and any time I questioned my dad and Mary's behavior, they were sure my mom was putting me up to it. Things escalated one night when my dad came to pick us up for a visit. My mom and Mary ended up getting into a fist fight, where Mary's swung first and my mom punched her so hard she fell backwards. My brothers and I watched from the apartment in which we were living in at the time. Mom went immediately to the police, but my dad and Mary never even called. My mom didn't press any charges, and the whole incident sort of faded away. We ended up moving into a big house a while after that, where we still are today. Dad and Mary started to have problems and split up. I thought maybe she would be gone for good, or at least gone for the most part, but she never really went away. My dad started to become a person we could somewhat rely on again when she was gone. I got to know my little sister more, the baby they had, and things were okay. She started coming around again though. Whenever she was with my dad in front of us, she would whisper in his ear. My dad would drink more. He became physically ill looking and would start to gain weight. We could always tell when Mary was around because the difference was so drastic. He even officially divorced her at one point, but it was obvious they still got together off and on. My brothers and I went on with our lives, and we became too old for visiting the way we were. Whole weekend visits became just going to see my dad for an evening. The whole time, however, the phone calls never stopped. They weren't as frequent, but they were there in the background, like a reminder that she was always there, lurking. When I got into high school, visits from my dad just stopped altogether. We usually talked on the phone here and there, and I saw him when I had events like a marching band competition, a formal dance, milestones like graduating high school. It was pretty common to go a while without hearing from him sometimes. Mary was only a thought. I hadn't seen her in years. I never saw her anywhere. At all. The phone calls had stopped, but only because we had gotten rid of the house phone. I was a freshman in college, and I remember it being right around Halloween of 2009. I was shopping with my aunt for some cheap decorations at the Walmart by my house. I saw a woman walking slowly behind us, and my aunt and I both did a double take. It was Mary. She was totally following us around the store. She looked like she was maybe 50 years old. Then when I last saw her, and her clothes were disheveled, my aunt kept elbowing me to go talk to her because we weren't exactly sure if this was really her. It could have been someone who looked really similar. I worked up the nerve and went up to her. "Is your name Mary?" I asked. "Yes, it is." "Hi, Samantha, how are you?" Using my name like that really caught me off guard. She knew who I was, and wasn't bothering to talk to me. She didn't even act like she had been caught. I asked her if she had talked to my dad lately, because it had been a while since I heard from him. She swore up and down that she hadn't spoken to him for months, which I later found out was a lie. This was the beginning of my dad going missing. After I saw her, something happened, and it's hard to pin down what, but he completely disappeared. His cell phone was shut off, and when I called his work at the casino, where he had been working for over 15 years, they said that he was no longer working there, and couldn't tell me why. My mom and brothers and I called the police to file a missing persons report. We didn't have to wait because it was already been several weeks since we had heard from him. They helped us make a flyer, and we looked and asked all over. Everything led back to Mary, most likely being the last one to see him. By the time we started talking to her, it was mid-November. My mom and I called Mary, and she was told that she had, in fact, seen my dad on the night after Halloween. Mary told us that he was making a noose, and this would be the last time anyone ever saw him. We honestly didn't know what to believe. My dad was an alcoholic. It wasn't uncommon for him to say dramatic stuff, but we never considered suicide. When we told the detectives what Mary told us, they had her come in for questioning. She had told the detectives a completely different story, and her dates kept changing. There wasn't any evidence of anything, though, so there wasn't much they could do. The detectives did, however, tell us that we shouldn't talk to her anymore. To quote them, "We don't know what she's capable of." Things went on like this until they found him on January 4, 2010. My dad was found dead in a storage unit. He had pulled his car in, shut the unit door, and let it run until he died. And he had been there for 63 days. There were several suicide notes, all dated for November 2nd, one for my mom, one for each of his children. But there was an especially long note for Mary, where he dotted on her and talked about what a wonderful woman she was. The suicide note even said for her to take in any insurance money and use it on herself. The dates of the notes were so close to the date where Mary said she had seen him. There are a million things that could have happened, but I know that she had something to do with it. Even if my father did really kill himself, I know she had helped push him over the edge. I'm not one to just blame. I know my father was a troubled man. He was an alcoholic, and he was a depressant most of the time, usually because of Mary. But there was something so frustrating and horrendous about this woman. and there was zero evidence for me to prove anything against her. She wasn't allowed to come to the funeral. My mom and parts of his family put everything together. There wasn't anyone he knew that hadn't heard of her, and everyone felt that she was a bad woman. I found a Facebook profile of hers months after they found my dad. There were only 5 or 6 photos of her and some guy obviously happy, and they were all dated for January 4th, 2010. The next year on January 4th, 2011, she showed up at my family's house. We didn't let her in the house, and she kept saying something about having stuff of my dad's in the car. We told her to leave or else we'll call the police. That night, someone put red tissue paper in and around our mailbox. Even the next year, 2012, she called my mom and asked her to meet her in a Sonic Burger parking lot. She said she had a box of my dad's stuff to give us. My mom made my stepdad go instead of her, but she never showed. I feel like she wanted to do something bad to my mom. The next year, we didn't hear from her, but I did some research and it turns out that she was put in jail for making meth. It made a lot of sense for some of the things, but I still have so many questions and issues that are unanswered. Supposedly, she was let out sometime last year, summer of 2014, I think. The correctional facility she was at has a website, and it says that she was let out for good behavior in rehab. I found a different Facebook that showed her with some other family. God help them if she's pulling the same crap as she did with mine. Today I have no idea where she is, and until I can't move far away, I don't want to see Mary ever again. Updates, August 5th, 2015. I just want to update this while it's still fresh in my mind. My little brother received a visit from Scary Mary in person. My little brother works at a video game store. It was around 8 last night, and Madison, Mary's daughter, came in to buy a video game. My little brother was so shocked and he didn't recognize her. She introduced herself and my little brother couldn't do much. She asked for his phone number, but my brother didn't end up giving it to her because he had a weird feeling in his stomach. She took what she bought and left, and my little brother thought that that was the end of it. But maybe 5 to 10 minutes later, in walks Madison again, with Mary by her side. My little brother immediately recognized her and started to panic. Mary and Madison stood at the back of the store, whispering to each other. He said they were both smiling the whole time, and a couple of times they giggled to each other. Mary then looked at him right in the eyes, and started to head towards the counter my brother was behind. He said that he felt so angry, and his heart started to race. Instead of trying to confront her, he walked into the back of the store and let his coworkers ask if he could help her. Maybe 10 minutes later, she was gone, and his coworker told him that she left without asking for anything. My brother thinks that she was just making her presence known, and that she thought she could catch up with him like they were friends or something. I just know that I don't want this woman in my life anymore. I don't want her harassing my family members, and I want to move away as far as possible. We documented this incident with the police department, and they said that if it happens 3 times, then we can file for a restraining order. I really don't know what else to do. Anyways, I just thought this might be something you guys are interested in hearing. As much as I thought it finally might be over, she pops right back up again. It's not enough for her that my dad is dead. I guess she wants to have the last word too. She always wanted to have the upper hand, but yeah, I'll keep everyone updated if I find out more. Scary Mary Trilogy. Deep breath. I finally decided to post stories that concern my more unsavory family members, namely everyone on my mother's side. This story is one of the times that my cousin attempted to harm me or one of my siblings. My cousin Mary had always been an attention-seeking, loudmouthed little girl. She was blonde, mischievous, and full of energy. Being an equally loudmouthed, attention-seeking, half-white brunette, we butted heads a lot. This was especially true since, as a small child, I used to think that she was treated better than the rest of us grandkids because her parents were divorced and her father, our uncle, live with the grandparents still. Looking back on it now, it certainly excuses some of her behavior and explains it, but not everything. My family often let us kids spend a month out in the summer without our grandparents. We called it Camp Nana, and we would go camping, bake cookies, all the good stuff. But those times weren't without their dark side. Mary and I argued a lot. On the last day of our vacation, things went overboard. My grandparents had a hot tub in the back and they let us play in it by ourselves while we waited for my mom to come pick her kids up. My cousin was going to be staying for an extra couple days. I can remember my cousin trying to rub it in our faces, but I was ignoring her at that point, which only made her angrier. I don't remember what happened next, but my mom told me the rest of the story. Apparently, she arrived early to pick us up and went out to the backyard where the hot tub was. She found Mary holding me under the water and flipped. My mom shoved Mary away and pulled me out of the water. I wasn't responsive, so she gave me mouth to mouth. I coughed up water and came back, shaken, but alive. Unfortunately, Mary and my uncle managed to convince my mom that they were just playing a game and that Mary hadn't meant to hold me under like that. So, next year we went back, and my mom didn't even take me to the doctors. I guess she didn't want to think that things could have gone so wrong, either. She was lost. This is the follow-up story for a deep breath, only this time concerning my little sister Lynette and our cousin, Mary. This happened a couple years after the hot tub incident. It was my little sister's first time staying at Camp Nana. As previous years, she was still just a baby. Now that she reached toddler age, my parents felt that if I kept an eye on her, she could spend a week or two with us. For reference, I believe I was around 11 years old. My brother Dan was 9, Mary was 8, and Lynette was 4. During our stay, there was an arcade and play place my uncle used to take us to. Think Chuck E. Cheese without the eerie animatronics or cold pizza. One side was the arcade bathrooms and prize counter. The other had the play structure, which was mostly blue. My little sister loves the color blue, so obviously, she wanted to spend the whole trip over there. I was mildly annoyed since I was the one to watch my sister. My brother was off in the arcade section. Our uncle had disappeared already. And I was not comfortable leaving my cousin alone with Lynette. Why? Because Mary hated Lynette. It was simple jealousy that was turning into hate. Lynette was younger, the real baby of the family, and so she was taking attention away from Mary. Mary even lost some of the privileges she got being a child of a messy divorce. Extra toys during the shopping trips, staying up extra late while my brother and I were sent to bed, because then it wouldn't be fair to Lynette, or it would wake Lynette up. She was a lot more argumentative and well bitchier than usual because of this. It got on my brother and my nerves. To top it all off, I was worried that Mary might try to pull some sort of stunt while we were out playing, because of what she had done earlier. Earlier in the day, we were in my grandparents' basement playing dress-up. My mother had left a lot of old prom dresses down there, and our nana was a bit of a seamstress, so we were having a lot of fun. I see Mary go off into the side room of the basement. It is also the laundry room, and I think that she wants privacy to change. I'm sitting on the steps with my grandmother watching Lynette run around. Nana goes upstairs to get water, and Mary comes back into the room. I notice that she hasn't changed, and felt kind of weirded out, especially since she's holding something very tightly in one of her hands. Mary then proceeds to throw Tide in my little sister's face. Lynette screams and thankfully ducks, which keeps the Tide off of her. Me? I'm already screaming at Mary, demanding to know what the fuck she was doing. First time I ever cursed. It sounded odd even in my ears. Nana came back down. I got in trouble for cursing, and Mary got off free because my sister wouldn't say she did anything. I barely got to go to the arcade with them. At the arcade, things went downhill fast. Mary convinced Lynette that it would be fun to play a game where they ran away from me and hid. I told Lynn that she needed to stay where I could see her, so it pissed me off that she would listen to Mary over me. The two kept going in and out of the play structure. I couldn't keep an eye on them, and I couldn't keep up since I was taller, and had trouble climbing quickly through the tubes and such. For 2 rounds, I would find Mary alone without Lynn, and proceed to crawl and climb about calling her. I found her abandoned in a tube somewhere, confused and displeased that I had come to play with her and not her cousin. Then Mary would swoop in and off they would go again. I climbed outside the play structure. After failing to find them in it a 3rd time, I saw Mary coming back into the play area from the arcade. Rushing over to ask her where Lynn was, Mary giggled. "I don't know." Whatever. I pushed past her and began to search the arcade area too. I found Dad and asked if she had seen Lynn and Mary walking around. He barely took his eyes off his game and said no. Our uncle was still nowhere to be found. I did another sweep of both the play area, arcade, and woman's bathroom. No Lynn. Panic set in, and I had one of the employees page my sister, still nothing. An employee was sent to look for Lynn. Mary came over and asked what was going on. I saw red. I grabbed her and shook her, demanding to know what she did with Lynn. I shoved her against the wall, intending to beat the shit out of her. Another employee had to pull me off. The sound of crying made me look over. Lynn was with another customer who said he had found her in the men's bathroom sitting in the corner and crying. Lynn was given one of those huge lollipops for free to help her get over the ordeal. We were then asked to wait in the sitting area until they found our parents. Our uncle stumbled in half an hour later, probably already high from drugs. We were promptly kicked out. My brother bought me a purple ninja sword with its tickets as an apology for not taking me seriously. We took turns keeping Lynn away from Mary for the rest of our trip. Unfortunately, Mary was still not punished because she spun the story that they were again just playing a game. Nana didn't want any fights, and our uncle was obviously going to take his kid's side. When we got home, I told our mom, who decided that she wasn't going to let Lynn stay at Camp Nana if Mary was around. I can still picture her face as she said, horrified, "I bet Mary would have loved it if something happened to Lynn." Thankfully, the next year would be our last and probably the worst. The night I protected her. Hello all. I'm sorry this has taken me so long to post. It's a hard memory for me to drag up or even write about. Some people may not sympathize with how strongly this event affected me, but it has made me significantly more lenient towards Mary, and one of the breaking points between my family and our relatives on my mother's side. Sorry for the blabbering. This takes place during the winter break, when I was around 11 years old or so. In all honesty, I've tried not to think about these things for so long that my memory of when, age-wise, I remember this event pretty clearly. It happened is a little fuzzy. My school, which is run by a nunnery, had oddly long holidays, so as kids got an entire month off of school for Christmas break, beginning of December to early January. So the week after Christmas, before we went back to school, my mom asked me if I wanted to spend some time up at Nana and Papa's. It would just be me, since she didn't want Lynn spending time with them, because Mary was going to be there and Dan, my younger brother, had football camp so he could not go. It didn't bother me, because I was excited to hang out with my grandparents, even if Mary was going to be there. I wasn't scared of Mary, and I was sure that I could take her because I just got my orange belt in Taekwondo. The naiveness of youth, I guess. We packed a bag, and Nana and Papa came to pick me up in Centralia so we could drive to their home in Tacoma. Things were kind of off from the start. My grandparents were acting weird, and Mary was more possessive of her toys and flaunted them more than I could remember. There was also my uncle. My uncle Rob was in his 30s at the time and still lived with his parents. I knew he was regularly smoking, and later learned that he also regularly used other, harder drugs, which eventually cost him his job and visitation rights to Mary. I knew he was a very negative person who enjoyed getting his kicks out of teasing and belittling those around him, especially physically. I had never been so frightened of a person as I was during that trip. I tried to shrug his sour attitude off, and wanted to do something fun and enjoy my time with my grandparents free of siblings. I could pretty much ignore Mary for the most part, but things went downhill very quickly. The second night I was there, Mary saw me reading manga in the living room and wanted to look at it. I was on a Sailor Moon kick at the time, and I'm sure everyone knows that in the manga, during their transformations, you see the silhouettes of the girls so they look naked. Mary read one of the books and said that it was dumb. I was annoyed but again shrugged it off. Mary left the room. Not 2 minutes later, my uncle comes storming in. He grabs me by my arms and hauled me out of the couch and starts shaking me. "What the hell do you think you're doing showing my daughter porn?" I dropped the book in fright, stammering that it was not porn at all. It was a comic about superheroes, but they were girls. Rob dropped me and snatched the book up. He shook it in my face, almost hitting me on the nose. "If I ever see you showing her trash like this again, I'll beat the shit out of you." And just like that, he stormed off, leaving me speechless. I tried to bring it up to Nana, but she shut me down quickly, not wanting to talk about it. She said Uncle Rob was under a lot of stress at work, and that he didn't mean it. I tried to confront Mary about it, but she said it was just a joke, and that I shouldn't make a big deal out of it. Besides, I know where my dad keeps his real porn magazines. Your dumb comic was boring. I was so frustrated, I locked myself in my room for the rest of the night. By the time morning came, I was ready to forgive and forget. But Rob was even nastier than before. He forgot his keys to the house after coming back from work that afternoon and screamed at me to open the door. He started cursing at me when I didn't open it fast enough. Once he got inside, he repeatedly slammed the door in front of my face, yelling about how hard it is for you to open a fucking door, you fucking half-chink. I thought you guys were supposed to be smart. Once again, I tried to talk to my Nana about it, but instead of taking my side, she forced me to apologize to my uncle. She even stood behind me while I did it. Uncle Rob just laughed and said, "You should be sorry, you're so stupid." I was absolutely ready to go home, but I didn't want to call and make my parents drive 5 hours to pick me up so late in the afternoon. I decided I would ask permission to call them in the morning. I should have made the call right away, but I was raised learning that those who have authority over you are always right, and you shouldn't question them. In this instant, that authority was my grandparents and my uncle. It has taken me a while to break that habit. Everything hit rock bottom when my grandparents announced they were going out to dinner by themselves, and that Uncle Rob would watch Mary and me. I was upset, but didn't say anything. Mary seemed a little nervous too, but I figured she was worried I would try and do something to her because of the whole porn manga thing. I was wrong. Not long after they leave, Uncle Rob suggests that we go out for pizza and hit the arcade. I reluctantly agree. The arcade is kind of boring, as it is a Friday night, and there is a line for most of the games. I still managed to snag a cool prize with the tickets I did win. It was some sort of wooden puzzle, I think. Anyways, Mary and I get super bored and we try to find Uncle Rob to ask to go home. He's nowhere to be seen, and just like last time, we don't have a phone number to call. We don't even know the number of my grandparents' house to call and ask them to pick us up, so we are resigned to wait. Thankfully, Uncle Rob picks us up in around 10 minutes or so it wasn't that long of a wait. However, when we pile into his truck, he's acting strange. He's jittery, and it takes him a minute to start the car. I realize now that he was high. Rob's driving is erratic. He's swerving and speeding along the road. Cars are honking at us. It is a miracle that we did not get pulled over. Maybe not a miracle. My grandfather was in the police force, and he had a very high position. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, clinging to the door handle for dear life. I can barely breathe. Mary is another story. She's screaming, begging for Rob to stop, that she's scared. Rob screams back, telling her to shut up. Mary starts crying. Rob starts laughing and whooping. Mary cries the whole way home. We get into the house, and he staggers around, yelling and talking in half sentences, heads over to the living room. Mary and I are lingering in the front room of the house. Rob looks over at me and asks if I'm scared. I say nothing, and he just laughs. He heads over to the living room. I take Mary's hand and take her to her grandparents' bedroom. They have their own TV, so I turn it on. Mary is really shaken up, and I feel pity for her. I quietly go to the bathroom and get her a glass of water. She thanks me, and I tuck her into bed so that she can watch cartoons and relax. I sit on the floor, placing my body in front of the door. It just feels right, an instinct, I think. Mary falls asleep. It gets dark outside, and I turn the TV down low so it doesn't wake her, but I leave it running so I'm not alone in the dark. All I can think is, where is Nana and Papa? Why are they not back yet? A while later, I'm not sure how long I sat there. I hear the back door open and slam. Another period of silence, and the back door opens and shuts again. I hear Rob shuffling around in the kitchen, then moving to the living room. Suddenly, he shouts out, "Where are you?" I jerk up right against the door, feeling a jolt of fear go down my spine. Just from the way he's talking, it's not just angry, he sounds frenzied. I know something isn't right. Rob begins to storm through the house, going through the rooms. He's yelling for us. In a moment of panic, I grab the nightstand and drag it over to the bedroom door. I let its weight help me hold it shut. Rob is screaming now. "Alice! Where are you, you little bitch? If you don't get your ass out here, I'm gonna call my friends. They'll teach you a lesson." He reaches our door and starts pounding on it, trying to force his way inside. I think the only reason he did not manage it was because whatever he was tripping on affected him so strongly. His ranting and ravings get worse and worse. Suddenly, I see a car's headlights go down the road. I hear tires pull to a stop near the house, and my grandparents' voices. They come into the house, and Rob starts screaming at them too. There's a sound of scuffling, and then it's quiet. In the silence, I hear someone sniffling. Looking over, I see Mary's tear-stained face is reflecting the light from the TV. "Go to sleep, Mary," I say quietly. Mary just sniffles again. I push the nightstand away from the door and slowly creep out into the hallway and down to the living room. Nana is standing there looking ruffled. Uncle Rob and Papa are nowhere to be seen. I ask where they are, and she turns around. "What are you still doing up? Go back to bed. But go, now!" I hurry back to the spare room that is my bedroom. The digital clock next to the computer reads 3 a.m. They had left us alone with my uncle starting at 5 p.m. I found out later they had been in a casino all night. The next morning, I demanded to call my parents. Nana agrees. "I think you should go home." Once we get home, I tell them everything. Everything after that is a blur. Both of my parents spent a long time on the phone. I remember my mom screaming at one point, telling them that she never wants to hear from any one of them again before slamming the phone down. I was not the only one to raise complaints. Mary spoke to her mother, who in turn pushed for Rob to lose his visitation rights. I'm not sure how it was managed, but he lost both his job and rights to see Mary. To my knowledge, he hasn't seen Mary since that winter, and neither have I, in person at least. We spoke online and through email a few times, but we never reconnected, and neither of us mentioned that night ever again. It is one of the most frightening experiences of my life, and still haunts me to this day. Even though I did everything I thought I could, I still feel this horrible guilt and pain every time I think about it, or any of my mother's family. I wish I could say that we actually managed to never hear from them again. Better yet, I wish I could say that they straightened up their act, and we have come to an understanding. I can't. It may not be a scary story for you, but it was for me. I honestly don't know what could have happened if he managed to force his way into the room. Either way, I don't want to meet any of them ever again.